Brigadier A.C.F. Jackson, CVO, CBE, ADC, born 1903, died 2000. An obituary. A personal tribute by Dennis Perron, a senior Freemason on the island of Jersey, in fact, a provincial Grand Secretary. Many formal tributes will have been paid to this great man in many parts of the world, in South and West Africa, the West Indies, France and Germany, as well as all over the UK. But this is a very personal one by someone who is proud and privileged to have become a close friend of such a distinguished yet unassuming personality, and who earned and held the respect and affection of all with whom he came into contact during his long and remarkably successful life, stretching over practically the whole of the last century. Our careers and interests, Masonically and otherwise, in fact ran in uncanny parallel for nearly 60 years, something we were to discover only after we each had found ourselves in retirement in my native island of Jersey, some 30 or so years ago. Crosby Jackson lived just a mile or so along from the coast from my home, so I was able to visit him frequently, especially after his mobility was considerably reduced as he moved into his 90s. Indeed, I spent several hours with him just a few days before he died, when his mind was as clear and alert as ever, only his physical frailty betraying his great age. Crosby Jackson was initiated in Ashanti Lodge number 3717 under the English Constitution in Kumasi, the Gold Coast, now Ghana, in August 1928. So at the time of his death he had been a member of the craft for over 70 years. Thus commenced a Masonic career which was to match the distinction which he achieved as a professional soldier. His interest in Masonic history and research developed spectacularly after his retirement, when he was able to devote to these pursuits nearly all his time, considerable talents and intellectual skills. As I have already mentioned, we shared more than a common interest in Freemasonry. We each served with the British Army in the Middle East during World War II, at one time in the same theatre of operations. Then, after the war, when Crosby Jackson resumed his military and diplomatic career, serving for the most part in what was then the colonial empire, I was starting my civilian career in Whitehall, in which of all departments of state was the Colonial Office. And quite remarkably, and unbeknown to each of us at the time, we each had our last assignments in Paris, he as military attaché to the British Embassy, and I as one of Her Majesty's Government's representatives at UNESCO, which had its headquarters in that beautiful city. Our association was resumed when we worked together in the Jersey Masonic Library and Museum, which was still suffering the ravages of the looting and pillaging inflicted during the occupation of the Channel Islands by enemy forces from 1940 to 1945. Crosby Jackson as chairman and I as librarian and curator. We also acted as representatives for the QC Correspondence Circle, and later we were each in turn accorded the honour of being invited to become full members of Quater Coronati Lodge. Crosby became master in 1975, followed immediately by his appointment as Prestonian lecturer in 1976. He also made a considerable contribution to the Jersey Lodge of Installed Masters. Because of his worldwide acknowledgement as a Masonic writer, researcher and speaker, Crosby Jackson was able to persuade others of a similar ilk to come to Jersey to speak at meetings of the Lodge, and in many cases to go to Guernsey to do likewise in our sister island. As a result, attendances and membership soared to unprecedented proportions, which, as secretary of the lodge, I was well placed to observe. So we had much to talk about when we met in his beautiful home, literally a stone's throw from the beach in the spectacular Royal Bay at Groveville, alongside the Royal Jersey Golf Club links adjoining. There, in his study, surrounded by his massive Masonic library and his vast collection of Masonic papers and memorabilia, Crosby Jackson spent countless hours pursuing his researches and writing, with a connecting door to his billiard and snooker room, which housed his unique collection of military medals and other reminders of his distinguished career as a professional soldier, and with a seemingly limitless supply of the best malt whisky on tap with which to ply his many friends, Masonic and otherwise. This remarkable and delightful man spent his last years in tranquillity and contentment. Had it not been for the peripatetic nature of his profession as a soldier and government servant of such great distinction, Crosby Jackson would no doubt have aspired to even higher Masonic rank and office than in fact he achieved. However, I feel that the province of Jersey went some way to compensate for this by recommending and securing his promotion in the craft to past Grand Sword Bearer in 1986, by which time he had reached the venerable age of 84, and also to the 33rd degree of the ancient and accepted right 2 years earlier. It must surely be unlikely that any of us who knew Alexander Crosby Fishburne Jackson will ever meet his like again. He had the great gift of quietly and unobtrusively displaying an adherence to his conception of unselfish service to his country, his family, his friends, comrades in arms, and brethren in the craft, and indeed in stimulating this in others. We all deeply mourn his passing, but will ever remain thankful that we had the good fortune and privilege of sharing and enjoying his company and friendship, and being able to wonder at the store of sagacity and wisdom and the wide and rich experience which was embodied in such an unassuming personality. Jersey, February the year 2000, and reproduced in the annual transactions of Quater Coronati Lodge for the year 2000.